Here's how to play like Trey, ear training with about 20 different Phish songs. We're also going to reference some more popular songs to help solidify the identity of these intervals for you. If you're in need of one-on-one Zoom guitar lessons, please send me an email or check out any of the links below. Be sure to subscribe, like the video, and hit the bell for notifications. First thing we need to do is explain that intervals are a measured distance between any two notes, and we use half steps to measure that distance. The next thing we need to do is categorize all the intervals into 3 different groups to make it a little bit easier to digest. The first group is perfect consonant intervals, and there's only 4 in here. First up is a perfect first, aka a unison interval. That would be the same exact pitch, a C and a C, a B and a B, etc. It's impossible to do it on the piano, so I'll play it on the guitar where you can actually play the same pitch at 2 different spots on the neck. Here's a C and here's another C. So describing that sound, it sounds very smooth. All the perfect consonant intervals sound very smooth. I always think of like a very placid lake with no waves or ripples on it. And thinking about a Phish song, I think of the tune, the opening lick of Riff. Now there's 0 half steps between a perfect first and another perfect first because it's the same exact pitch. So one of the best ways to describe that is it sounds like the exact same note. Next up is a perfect fourth interval, and the distance between a root note and a perfect fourth is 5 half steps. Now there's a couple of Phish songs that are really famous for using this interval. First, let's take Stash. The first 2 notes of the main lick go, and a pop culture reference or a popular song reference would be Here Comes the Bride, here comes the bride. Another Phish song we could use is the first 2 notes in First Tube. But it's just those first 2 notes. So there you go. For a perfect fourth, think of Here Comes the Bride, First Tube, and the 2 opening notes in the main theme of Stash. The opposite interval of a perfect fourth is a perfect fifth interval. A perfect fifth is 7 half steps, and that sounds like this. Kind of like a perfect first. Nice and smooth, kind of like a perfect fourth. Also nice and smooth. A perfect fifth is a really smooth interval. And a couple of references, we can use the song 2001. Those first 2 notes of the main lick in 2001 are a great way to memorize a perfect fifth interval. For a few pop culture references, we can think of Star Wars theme. We can also think of the OEO in Wizard of Oz. That's a perfect fifth interval. Next we have a perfect eighth or an octave, which is the same note. You could do a C and a C, a B flat and a B flat, but the pitch is different. It's actually the furthest apart interval that exists. It's 12 half steps away, so think a C and then a C above. That dyad is also very smooth. So a couple of Phish songs we can reference, the opening notes of Reba. You can think the tweezer leg. So it's a really far apart interval, but it sounds really smooth. It's a good way to think of a perfect octave. For a popular song reference, we can think of the movie Wizard of Oz and think of the hit song from there, Somewhere Over the Rainbow, the first 2 notes. Somewhere over the rainbow. Also, you can think of Manteca. The first 2 notes of that lick. Boom, bam, boom, bam. Just think distance. Distance is really important with an octave. It's your lowest note to your highest note within 1 octave. In the next group, imperfect consonant intervals, we're going to study 3s and 6s. So first up is our minor third, 3 half steps. Kind of a sad sounding, somber sounding interval. I like to think of the tune Funky Bitch, where, not a Phish song, but where the opening notes are. That's an interval of a minor third. It's actually the flat 7 and the 5 of the key that they're in, but the distance between those 2 notes is a minor third interval. And it's the reference that I used to use when I was studying ear training in college, and it helped me get through my ear training quizzes, was thinking about that song. to memorize a minor third. Another Phish song we can use are the opening two notes of Mike's song. Just those first two notes though. For a popular reference, some people like to think of the song Greensleeves. But again, just those first two notes. Next up at 4 half steps apart is a major third interval. A more triumphant, happy kind of sound. Not really a pop culture reference or a popular music reference, but a popular item in life, a doorbell. An inverted major third there. Me do dee do. For a Phish song, I like to use the last note in the simple lick. That major third to root. To help me memorize a major third interval. Now for our next imperfect consonant interval, a minor 6, 8 half steps apart, I like to use the song Free. The opening notes of Free. So now a minor 6 is basically an inverted major third. Say I've got this F sharp here and this D here. If I play the D and then the F sharp above, there's a major third. So a minor 6 is just a major third inverted. I like to use that free interval. Now a popular song is Scott Joplin's Entertainer. To memorize a minor 6 interval. Our next imperfect consonant interval is a major 6, 9 half steps apart. Now, a pop culture reference is the theme song for the broadcasting company NBC. So the first two notes of that are a major 6. NB. So I didn't come up with any Phish songs that used a major 6 in a melody or an accord right away, but I did realize that Trey's most used scale when in a minor sounding jam or song, Trey uses the mode Dorian. Now the special identity note of the Dorian scale is that major 6 from the 1. And he'll play it in all sorts of great ways. He really likes to bend that major 6 up to a minor 7 in a minor jam like this. And then play some blues licks after that. So think Dorian jams when thinking about a major 6. On to our next group of intervals, dissonant intervals. And yes, these sound more dissonant than the consonant ones. Now remember, the word consonant means pleasing to the ear, and dissonant would mean displeasing to the ear, but these are subjective terminology that we use in music education. There's plenty of music that uses dissonant intervals and it sounds good to the listener, but it's kind of an old way of looking at these intervals, and it really helps identify them on the spot. Now our first dissonant interval is a minor second, like a C and a C sharp, only 1 half step apart. Now they're really close together and you can hear those waves just bouncing like crazy. C and C sharp. Now a Phish song that uses this interval in the very opening notes is Carini. It's those top two notes that descend. Da, da. It's actually doing the minor second down to the perfect first in a reverse order. Now in terms of the key of that song, you're actually doing flat 6, 5, 1, but in relationship to each other, da 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 da. That is a minor second, so it always helps me to memorize a minor second by thinking about the Carini notes. For a pop culture reference, think of the movie Jaws. To help remember a minor second. Next up in our dissonant intervals category is a major second. A major second interval is a whole step apart or 2 half steps apart. For a pop culture reference, think of the song Happy Birthday. The first two notes, Happy Birthday. For a Phish song, I love to think about Mike's bass line in the beginning of the Reba Jam. Plays an E flat, up to an F. So that's a nice way to memorize a major second interval. Our next dissonant interval is the tritone interval, aka an augmented fourth or a diminished fifth. And later in the video, I'll talk about why there's multiple names for some of the intervals. And now a tritone interval, which is 6 half steps apart. This splits the octave right down the middle. It's the only interval, if you keep on repeating that distance, you'll get the same 2 notes over and over. So one way to remember the sound of a tritone interval at 6 half steps apart is to think of the European ambulance sound. This is also known as the blues note, which has got a really dissonant sound. Now, instead of thinking about a Phish song, I thought about a song that they used to cover, which was the Simpsons theme. The opening 2 notes of the Simpsons theme in the beginning of an episode are a tritone interval. Those first 2 notes. Next up is a minor 7th interval. Let's take this A and this G here, which is 10 half steps apart. A really common interval to hear in a dominant 7 chord. For a Phish song, I like to think again about a mic bass line. I think about the 2 notes in the ghost bass line. Bo-ba. So that big wide interval there with a bit of dissonance is a minor 7th interval. And last but not least, our final interval, 11 half steps apart, is a major 7th interval. So I couldn't really think of any other Phish songs that have this in the melody. It's a very dissonant and far apart interval. It's just not very common to think of in most Phish songs in a lead or melody part. So I think of it more of in a chord. Think about Waste, the 2nd chord that he plays. You can hear that dissonance from a D to a C sharp. That's a major 7th interval. It's also used in songs where he plays a major 7th chord, like Lawn Boy or Way, perhaps. That major 7th is inside of those chords. It's also in a minor major 7th chord, like he would play in Colonel Forbin's Ascent. Pretty nasty sound and interval with that root and that major 7th. Now let's talk about what solfeggio is. Solfeggio is the Italian syllables that we use for singing or sight singing to help us identify and be able to sing these intervals. A perfect first can be called do. An augmented first or minor second, they have 2 different names, can be called D or Ra, depending on how you're looking at it via notation. A major second can be called Re. An augmented second or minor third can be called Re or Me, depending on which way you're looking at it. A major third can be called Mi, spelled M-I. A perfect fourth interval is called Fa. An augmented fourth, diminished fifth, aka tritone, it has 3 different names there, can be called Fi or Se. A perfect fifth interval is called So, with an L at the end that we don't pronounce, S-O-L, So. An augmented fifth or minor sixth, more commonly known as a minor sixth interval, can be called Si or Lay. Lay is a bit more common because we use it in the minor scale. A major sixth interval can be called La. A minor seventh interval can be called Te. And a major seventh interval can be called Ti, the leading tone. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. It is a half step below your do, which is your perfect octave. So that's another do to do if you think about a perfect octave. Now the reason we have 2 different names for some of these intervals, like augmented first or minor second, is because the C sharp is a D flat. You have to think about the enharmonic equivalent, and that mostly applies to reading notation. For the majority of the video, I kept them as the more commonly known ones, like I refer to a minor second as opposed to an augmented first, because I think of a minor second as a popular note in Phrygian mode or a flat 9 chord. Also, an augmented second is much more commonly known as a minor third when you're thinking about building chords or playing minor scales. For a tritone, an augmented fourth or a diminished fifth I think are pretty equally used, because we use augmented fourths a lot as major 7 sharp 11 chords or dominant 7 sharp 11 chords, but there's an equal amount of diminished fifths out there when you think about a diminished chord. Augmented fifth is quite popular thinking about an augmented chord, but a minor 6 lay is pretty popular when you think about a minor scale. A major 6 can also be called a diminished 7th, fully diminished 7th, but a major 6 we use in quite a few different modes, so I like to stick with La. It's in the major scale as well. And for a minor 7th, it's very rare to think of an augmented 6, so I only reference a minor 7 as Te. And that's it to explain all the intervals. It really helps to memorize the solfeggio, think about these different songs to help you memorize the identity, the measured distance of each interval. Thanks for watching, and take care.